Thank you, Acting Speaker. And I do take quite a bit of joy when I'm able to rise in this place, in fact any place, and get to speak about sport. It is my first great love, of course, and that is not... there are no boundaries. I'll watch pretty much anything, darts included. Sorry? Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you. So I'm more than happy to rise to speak on the State Sporting Legislation Amendment Bill 2024. It's been spoken about before by the member for Nepean, who didn't go through every clause, but there is quite a bit, to go through with the tidying up of red tape. There is a couple of things I did want to highlight, of course, though, and we'll start with the State Netball and Hockey Centre Advisory Committee, netball being one of my great loves, and have played at the State Netball and Hockey Centre many times, and have even competed in Taekwondo at the State Netball and Hockey Centre. It's a multifunctional centre and has had a level of investment. It's a great place. I've also played and refereed state titles netball there a number of times. And the advisory committee was a committee that offered advice to government on issues. Now, with changes in all sorts of sporting rules, Netball Victoria have changed the rules again this year, which then does have an impact on things like that, those sorts of things, when there are rules which might be the run-off of the courts, the netball courts for referee safety, player safety, all that kind of thing, they're the things that need to be fed back to government so that there could be changes made to spaces. This is really important stuff that, unless you are involved in playing netball at those particular facilities, you wouldn't otherwise know. So to abolish the committee, to me, is... It doesn't make any sense. Fixing it, yes, there may have been all sorts of issues around the committee and getting onto it, etc., but to abolish it rather than rectify those is perplexing, to say the very least. And we know that it's a great facility, and one of the great joys when I was growing up playing country netball, in fact, I actually got my C-grade umpiring badge at the State Netball and Hockey Centre. I won't give you the year, but I was 15 years old, which is quite an achievement for someone of 15 to be awarded their C-grade badge back in those days. Yeah, 8 years ago. That's exactly right. Thank you, Member for Nepean. I appreciate that. But the training for that happens on our country courts, and when you get there and you see these facilities that are like, wow. Meanwhile, back at our home courts, like the courts at John James Oval, or John James Park in Oyen, for example, have needed resurfacing for years and years and years, and there's complications around the committee of management at grassroots level, which also perhaps need to be and could have been looked at in this particular bill. When it gets down to councils, committee of management, different clubs and associations that might use these facilities, who's responsible for what, it ends up largely being the volunteers that do the work in maintenance, that do that resurfacing work, whether it is for netball. And I know the Oyen Football Netball Club did a huge amount of work to make sure their courts were safe. Now, these are volunteers out in a town of around 1,000 people, and they are a magnificent community. But there's a very stark contrast when we talk about grassroots level facilities and things like the State Netball and Hockey Centre. Cardinia Park has been one that many constituents have come to me when post-budget, when the $4 million scoreboard was talked about, and now it's not very affectionately known as Pork Barrel Park in my electorate, because the rigmarole that many clubs have had to go through to get new scoreboards, digital scoreboards, so that kids, when I was growing up, the footy score was changed by kids up in the scoreboard on freezing cold winter's days, changing the scores manually for a can of Coke and a packet of chips. And that was reward aplenty for us. But we have evolved. It's 2024, and the rigmarole that many clubs have had to go through to get simple scoreboard upgrades, because volunteerism, as we know, is dropping off. It's hard to find. They do a magnificent job. Every sporting club in the state, in the country, and people that volunteer for them do a magnificent job. But it's hard to find volunteers. Even trying to run a canteen these days is really, really hard. So you can understand the contrast when those of us out in the most isolated parts of the state, and I was in Murrayville last week having a look at their new club rooms and their new facilities, which is fantastic. But their league is in South Australia. So just to give you some perspective on how isolated some of these clubs are and how much they rely on volunteers and how much just a little fraction of that money that goes into places like the State Netball and Hockey Centre, Cardinia Park. I know, John James Oval would have benefited greatly. They had a desert race. I spoke about that in my members' statement earlier. That is a magnificent event. It's been going for 26 years now. But the security of this event is centres around land. They do it on private land at the moment. What happens with succession planning in farming when that might change hands? There's no security. So an investment from the state government to support such a huge event and events like it in all disciplines of sport that brings such huge economic value to smaller regional and rural towns is vitally important. The Mildura Harness Racing Club's another one. The Minister for Racing was in Mildura a couple of weeks ago and was kind enough to give the Mildura Harness Racing Club time to meet and discuss with them their options for upgrade. Their building was affected by floods during the heavy rains in 2022, and also, there's some issues around scheduling and whatever. But it was great of the minister to come and discuss that with the Harness Racing Club. That's another shared facility. You've got 2 footy clubs that play there, also 2 netball clubs. You've got cricket clubs, and you've got harness races. Trying to manage a venue like that is difficult, to say the very least, and it is the local showgrounds. The Mildura Racing Club, I also mentioned in my member statement earlier, inundated for 6 weeks in water taller than me, and managed to run their 100th Mildura Cup a couple of weeks ago. But it's taken over 12 months. They've been 18 months without racing, and that hurts clubs that rely on those facilities to be able to hold events like the Mildura Cup, which was a fantastic event. It really was. And the minister also attended that, which was fantastic. But these are the sorts of grassroots clubs, and we talk about sport being the backbone and the spine of country Victoria. They really are. So when it comes out in the news that Cardinia Park has had $4 million investment, or the MCG and things like that, regional people, you can't blame them for getting a little bit frustrated when there are so many volunteer hours that go into the maintenance and improvement of local facilities. The Mildura Lawn Tennis Club is another one that was inundated during the floods, and they've done a magnificent job. And tennis clubs do an incredible job, and they have, to bring that back to the state that it's in. They had their pro tournament earlier this year, which was fantastic, which I believe the member for Nepean won a long time ago. But it is, and he's ignoring me, and that's fine. The Hopetoun Go-Kart Club, also another fantastic community club, which have managed to, again, through volunteerism, and a lot of speedway and motorsport local clubs rely on their own funds, running raffles, sausage sizzles at Bunnings and things like that. But just to finish up, I could go through and name every single sporting club in my electorate, but I'd be here for the entire 10 minutes. But it is, I also need to mention the Birchip Watcham Netball Club, another club that have needed upgrades to their court that have been completed, but for safety reasons are unable to play on, or have been unable to play on. So, and councils trying to manage that as well, particularly small rural councils who are already stretched for resources, and they're not, that's not often the remit of councils, which is why it lands in the lap of volunteers. The Nullarbor and Witchyproof Narraport Footy Club, it's their last year this year, both of those small clubs. As I said, it is getting harder and harder for grassroots clubs to remain. So it is there last year. I wish them all the best, and all the best in their venture as an amalgamated club next year, which will be the Lions. So look forward to being able to support them next year.